So we're going to start now with this next chapter, which is chapter 7 today.
Yeah, chapter 7. So, Gregory, we are studying through the first canto, and Bhuvaneshwari will share the link. Amritwani, can you share the link on Vedabase for chapter 7?
I have it. I'm on Vedabase.
Yeah, Gregory has the full Bhagavatam.
Yeah, he has the full set.
I'm
So,
also
we are canto 1, chapter 7.
Canto
Okay,
one.
Prabhu.
It's very exciting. Just to give you a little brief background of what's going on. So the Srimad Bhagavatam starts with questions that the sages of Naimisharanya asked, right? About what is the ultimate good in the world? How can we be? What is the highest dharma, right? And then this the continues on, and so the last session that we've been talking about has been the appearance of Narada and Narada's autobiography, speaking about his life to his student Vyasa, who's feeling despondent after having compiled all the Vedas and the Puranas and the Upanishads. Vyasadeva is still feeling unhappy within the heart, dissatisfied. And his teacher Narada appears and he inquires, what is going on here? So then Narada tells him that you have written all these literatures, and in all of these literatures, you've encouraged people to engage in sense gratification in the name of religion. So you have used religion as a way for people to acquire name, fame, honor, distinction, and engage in materialistic activities. And as a result, you're not satisfied, and the people who are going to read those literatures are also not going to be satisfied.
Because spirit can only be satisfied by pure when it comes in touch with the Supreme Spirit. That is the nature of, just like the baby can only be fully satisfied when it comes in the lap of the mother. So every soul has that natural hankering to be reunited with the Supreme. And it cannot be done through karma, jnana, yoga, all these things. It's like putting the child in the lap of somebody else, and it's not fully satisfied.
I like that so much.
Although the person may be caring and nice and everything, but the child will not be satisfied.
And that is what the Bhagavatam says, you know,
Yeah.
when it talks about the highest dharma is that which can, lead us to this platform of unmotivated, uninterrupted love. And that's the only thing that can satisfy the self.
Yeah, it's like you can have so many lights in the house, but you need the sun. I mean, we wait for the sun in the morning, although we have lights in the night. So all these other processes, they are like this small lights. They cannot fully take care of us.
And so then Narada, talks about how he continues on, how he receives mercy, how he becomes who he is.
Yeah.
And it's also, in a sense, a rags to riches story, a spiritual rags to riches story.
Yeah.
Because Narada starts with very little in terms of he's just a young little boy, 5-year-old. He does not come from some exalted Brahmana parentage, and he's not surrounded by some great opulence. He
And
just
neither he's sent to some Ivy League ashrama
Yeah.
with the great sages.
No.
He just happens to be hanging out with his mother who's serving these sages, and he just likes them and he starts serving them. The sages also develop a liking for him. And just by hearing from them and serving them, he achieves their great mercy in the form of bhakti. So after this conversation ends between Narada and Vyasa, Narada just takes his veena and he just wanders off into the universe. And the sages now are very curious that what happens next, because this is where the Bhagavatam is going to happen now.
Okay, so let's read inside of this.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 7. And in this, we'll study a couple of important things. One is what vision and what is the realization that Vyasa achieves, and what is the impetus for Vyasa to share it with his son, and why does his son, although he's liberated soul, why does he get interested in the Bhagavatam? So this will help us to, why should I be interested in Bhagavatam? Why is Bhagavatam important? So that's the first part of this chapter. And the second part of this chapter now goes into the glories of Krishna, his pastimes. And it starts out with the like exposing the real world to us, because Bhagavatam is mentioned as it will take care of all miseries and suffering. So now we are thrown into the real world of uh, uh, all this. What do you call that?
Isn't this the chapter in which we're also going to be introduced to the hero of this book? Krishna.
Parikshit, yeah.
No, not Parikshit. Krishna, right? He's going to.
Yeah, Krishna is going to be introduced here.
As the
And then
hero
we'll
who
see.
comes charging on a chariot.
So Krishna will appear first in this chapter, and we will see Krishna's relationship with his devotees, because that is what bhakti is about. And Krishna appears in a very interesting scenario. We'll discover what that scenario is, but it's a real world scenario, a scenario of revenge, scenario of dealing with this material world, the extreme situations in this material world, and we'll learn how to apply this knowledge of Bhagavatam to extricate ourselves from this material world. So many things are going to happen in this chapter. Very, very interesting chapter. So let's stay tuned. Shaunaka vacha nirgate narade suta bhagavan badarayana shutavam sad abhipretam tata kim akarod vibhu.
Rishi Shaunaka asked, O Sutta, the great and transcendently powerful Vyasadeva heard everything from Sri Narad Muni. So after Narada's departure, what did Vyasadeva do? So I was just thinking that it's again interesting because every single time this question seems to come up. Even in Narada's story, they asked, so after the sages left, what did Narada do? And now they're asking, so after Narada left, what did Vyasa do? So that means that this is a very important point, that once the teacher is not physically present, what is our response? Because sometimes it's very easy for us to be, like really, really dedicated when we have the physical presence.
Yeah.
But when the physical presence is missing and all we are left with are the instructions, how do we respond? How do we act once they have left?
And it also emphasizes the importance of applying this knowledge. So at least meditating on it and thinking about it. This is an important aspect of bhakti, is to hear and then meditate and then apply. And then they want to see what is Vyasadeva. Did he just sit there and then just do his own thing, or how did he act on these instructions?
All right, let's continue.
Sutta vacha brahmanadyam saraswatyam ashrama paschime tate samya prasa iti prokta rishinam satravardhanaha.
Sri Sutta said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related to the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samya Prasha, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages.
So many important things here. First of all, this Brahmanadyam, it can also mean the river of the Vedas. It can also mean a river on whose banks Brahmanas sit, and which is very conducive for meditation.
Actually, in order for spiritual life, and Prabhupada talks about this, that how for spiritual knowledge, we need to create sacred space. And how, space is something that is so important for our spiritual cultivation. And of course, not all of us will be able to take off and just go live in the sacred places, which are maybe sometimes not even as sacred as we would want them to be. So what do we do in such a situation? The best thing to do is to create your sacred space right within your own house. And
Prabhupada says that ashrama, it is described that although Vyasadeva was a householder, yet his residence is called an ashrama. And he says, what is an ashrama? An ashrama is a place where spiritual culture is always the foremost. Not just the house is not just we live, but it's or make money or take care of our livelihood, but it is a place where we strive for spiritual perfection.
Actually, that's such a good point, because sometimes, especially in the Western world and also even in India, people think that ashram, in order to practice spiritual life, you have to go to some ashram, which is by the bank of Ganga, and only then I can be spiritual. But actually, even householder life is considered to be an ashram.
Yeah.
So the word ashram literally means a place where one takes shelter.
Yeah, and then we see here, Vyasadeva he has his ashram. End of this chapter, we'll see another great soul, Maharaj Parikshit. He was not just a householder, but he was a king. But his house, his palace is described as an ashram because he took complete shelter. He turned that house into an opportunity to serve the Lord. And that's why it is important, because not everybody can go to the forest.
And in fact, this is actually the most powerful way when we can convert or transform our own spaces into ashrams. Then not just that we can take shelter, but so many other people can actually also take shelter of that space. So this is actually the whole process of an ashram system, is to create ashram in whatever whatever phase of life we may be in is actually an ashram. It's a place for spiritual cultivation.
Just like there's a fire station every couple of miles, right? Wherever you go, a fire station is important. So similarly, it gives shelter to so many people, protects so many people. And an ashrama is like that. It's a fire station where it can extinguish the fire of material existence.
Beautiful. Text 3.
Tasmin swashrame vyaso badari sandamandite asino upasprishya pranidadhyo manasvayam.
In that place, Srila Vyasadeva, in his own ashram, which was surrounded by berry trees, sat down to meditate after touching water for purification. So his teacher had already told him, right, that this is what we need to do, you know, that you need to write. You need to write about, you know, the activities and pastimes of the Supreme Person so that will benefit people. Now, this is very interesting that before we execute any or we take on any great task, we have to first take time to connect and really really find that own space. Like, for example, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he spent, you know, what is it, 11 years?
Yeah, 10 years.
10 or 11 years. He just sat outside. He didn't even bother to construct a house or a place for himself. And he chanted, what, a billion names?
A billion names.
A billion names of Krishna, non-stop, day and night. Even like when it used to rain, he would just hold an umbrella. And only after that, he came to Kolkata and he started this great movement, this bhakti movement. So we see that all great souls, you know, before they embarked, even our Srila Prabhupada, before he came to the West, he actually spent time in Vrindavan. And he would, you know, there are accounts of how he would, you know, there was this one devotee who would, every night, he would hear the crying of somebody. And he couldn't understand, like, who's crying, you know, like, where is the sound coming from? And then one night he decided to trace it, and he saw that Srila Prabhupada, this is Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, and there's Rupa Goswami's samadhi there. And Prabhupada had a broom in his hand in the middle of the night, and he was sweeping the floor of, you know, the courtyard, and he was just crying and begging that, please give me your mercy, so that I can go and I can, you know, execute your desire.
So this is a very important aspect of, before engaging in anything in our life, we engage in this purification and meditation. Lord Brahma does it before he creates the like he populates the universe, creates the universe. All the great sages, all the great kings, before they even generate progeny, you'll see so many stories. Before the great kings, they generate progeny. They go into a meditation for, say, 5,000 years, 10,000 years, and lifespan was much greater that time. And they do this to illustrate that what we procreate, it could be a business, it could be children or whatever, our consciousness pervades what we create. So if our consciousness is pure, then we'll bring a better situation in this world and it will benefit everybody.
Actually, it's kind of interesting that suppose I have something that is really, I really need to take care of it. And it's like, I have to embark on this big project. Then, you know, if I just sit down to chant or meditate, somebody would say, oh my God, what's wrong with you? But it's in that space that we find, just for example, when we try to shoot an arrow, right? It's that moment when we hold the what is it, the bowstring, and then we pause at that moment to focus and to regroup ourselves. Then we know for a fact that we will be much more effective.
And ultimately, our ability to do anything ultimately comes from Krishna. So when we take that shelter, we get empowered. We get empowered, and Krishna's will flows through us. And that's the whole purpose of Vyasa engaging in this meditation. And often people think, what is that meditation? I can just sit in a room and just quietly think about nothing. That is meditation. But here, Narada instructed Vyasa that you should specifically meditate on Krishna and his pastimes. And this is what Vyasa does. So we are seeing that the result of Vyasa's meditation here. This is a very important verse in Bhagavatam. It kind of describes the whole spiritual realm and in one verse. Bhakti yoge namanasi samyak pranahite amale apashyat purusham purnam mayam cha tad apashrayam.
Thus he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, bhakti yoga, without any tinge of materialism. And thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control.
So, Prabhupada, please go ahead and read the purport. It's a beautiful purport. It kind of really explains that so many points are explained here. First of all, in order to see the absolute truth, to realize the absolute truth, the method that is given by Bhagavatam is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yogena, Manasi. The mind is actually best controlled by Bhakti Yoga. So that's what it means. And it's the best means of meditation is also Bhakti Yoga.
And the reason for that, I was just thinking as you were speaking, is why, because like we were just hearing this lecture by Radhanath Swami, right? That Arjuna says the mind is more difficult to control than even the raging wind. He says, I can control the raging wind, Krishna, no problem. But I can't control this restless mind.
Because the mind is not our energy. Sometimes we think that this is my mind, but dear brothers and sisters, this is not our mind.
This is
mind
Krishna.
This mind is Krishna's energy.
And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, how he says that Devi Esha Gunamai Mama Maya Durattaya. He says this energy of mine is very difficult to overcome.
So we can't control our mind. Let the owner of the mind control the mind, and that is a process of bhakti yoga.
And that's exactly what
in other processes, we are trying to control the mind, which is not our energy, and therefore we get frustrated. But in bhakti yoga, we let the owner of the mind control the mind.
Yeah.
Rishikesha. Krishna is another name for Krishna is called Rishikesha, which means he's the master of all the mind and the senses.
And I was just making this, it was just really marveling at this, that this is exactly what he sees, right? That this external energy, this material energy was completely under the full control of the Supreme Person, this Purnam, what is that word that is used? Absolute.
Apashyat. So this is another important point Prabhupada makes in this purport, that what did he see? He saw Purusham Purnam, that it basically said the absolute truth or personality of Godhead is a person. It's not a impersonal energy. It's a complete person. So what Narada saw was Krishna, all his different incarnations. He saw all his different energies, and including the material energy. Material energy, like when you have a list of important things, and the least important thing is put in the end. So when Vyasadeva says Apashyat Purusham Purnam Mayam Cha, which means this is the last energy he saw, which is the external energy. So he saw Krishna's internal energy, he saw Krishna's
he saw us,
pleasure potency, he saw the jivas, which are the marginal energy, and then he saw Krishna's material energy, which was like standing behind Krishna and almost in great
she was ashamed.
Yeah,
she was very, she was not so she's never so comfortable, facing Krishna, because, and we'll talk more about this, that she's been given this really thankless task of keeping the living entities illusioned in this world. And so he sees her standing at the back of Krishna, her face, like sort of like looking down. So,
and the other point Prabhupada makes is that the external energy is always under full control of Krishna. So many times people think that God is somebody who comes under the control of material energy. And this is the theory of monism, where they believe that God also comes under the control of external energy. But here we can see that that is not true. That is a false philosophy. That the real truth is that Krishna is always in full control of the material energy.
Yeah, and that is why when Krishna comes in this world, or Krishna's incarnations, like Lord Ramachandra, when he's crying, when Sita Devi is kidnapped, then people think, oh, he's just an ordinary person.
Yeah.
He also experiences the same kind of grief, just like when I experience, not realizing that we are actually taking our birth and our activities are driven by this external energy. But Krishna, on the other hand, is playing, this is a Leela. And so he is fully, he never takes or comes under the control of this external energy.
And the other reason why this statement is important is that sometimes people claim that I am God, this person is God, that person is God. So a jiva can never be God, because the jiva is always under the control of external energy. Like if we have the urge to go to the bathroom, we have to go to the bathroom. We can say, okay, we can't say that, okay, I'll control it. If we have a disease, we can't just say disease disappeared, right? So therefore,
to speak of that, like if I can't even stop the blinking of my own eyes. Like if I have to say, like, we're not going to blink our eyes. How long?
How long? So we are always under the control of external energy. So therefore, an ordinary living entity, no matter who they are, they can never be God. And God is somebody who has full control over the external energy. So many important concepts are clarified in this verse that really request you to read the purport very carefully and meditate on it.
And also the fact that he's a person, right?
He's a person.
He's a person, because it says here, Purusha. Purusha means that he's a original
enjoyer, or a supreme enjoyer, the supreme controller. And here Vyasadeva sees the Goloka, the highest spiritual planet of Krishna, where Krishna is standing with his cowherd boys and cowherd girls, and the whole Vrindavan he actually sees in this vision. And because of this vision, he gets inspired to actually write the Bhagavatam. What he sees in this vision, he will actually write down for us. So he doesn't just contain the vision to himself. He's so magnanimous that he's going to share his vision with us in the form of Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam is Vyasa's vision.
The Bhagavatam
written
is,
down.
yeah,
Written
it's
down.
so beautiful. Bhagavatam is definitely Vyasa's vision, and this is actually an overflow, right,
Yeah.
from his own meditation.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And Vyasa doesn't have to see the material energy. When he's seeing Krishna, he doesn't have to see the material energy, because all these other energies, they are so powerful and so dazzling. Like if you see the sun, then you can't really see a light bulb if you put the light bulb in front of the sun. But Vyasadeva, Krishna allows him to see the material energy, because Vyasa's mission is to help the living entities who are struggling with the material energy. So therefore, Vyasa sees the material energy, and the living entities struggle with the material energy as well. And then this is being explained in the next verses, that why he sees this material
So
energy.
wonderful. But it's already 10:32.
So I think we have
I
to
don't know.
take a pause.
We have to take a pause. Oh, Krishna, it's so blissful, but then.
The next 3-4 verses are very important. I really urge you to read it beforehand when you come tomorrow. So that way you will be in tune. You'll be riding on the same horse as Vyasa, and then we can ride at the same speed. So we'll take reflections, comments, questions, realizations.
A reflection is anything that you heard, that you liked, that you would like to give back to the group. And actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he makes a very good point. I'm going to read that in the end. Just one second. Can I get that book?
Which one?
This book, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's book. It's so powerful, this point. And this will inspire you and encourage you. Okay. So this is a little ahead, but I'll still go ahead and read it. So it says this verse shows that Bhagavatam produces prema. Simply by hearing it, prema arises. What to speak then of the greater effect if one engages others in hearing it? And what greater effect speaking it must have? And what even greater effect will engaging others in speaking about it produce? So when we all speak on this Bhagavatam, by sharing our reflections, then actually it automatically attracts the Supreme Person.
Yeah, that was, did you read the whole 3-4 lines?
Yeah, I just read the whole 3-4 lines.
So I really liked what you said. I didn't know about that. Is that Krishna? Another word for Krishna is Rishikesha, which is the master of the mind. But I would like to hear more upon how mind is not ours, it's Krishna's, and let him control it. Because I used to think that the God resides here in the heart of the soul. So I didn't know that the mind is also Krishna. I used to think mind is the bodily thing, like it's the biological thing. It comes from our intellect, which has nothing to do with God. So I'm a little surprised that the mind is Krishna's. So if you can talk a little bit.
What I meant was, mind is Krishna's property. It is not that it is Krishna's mind, but
Okay.
it's an instrument that Krishna has given us, but it's such a powerful instrument that we have no capacity to control it. We can only use it, but if we don't use it properly, most of the time we don't use our mind properly.
When
And
we
as a
don't
result,
use it properly, then we get used by the mind.
we get used by the mind.
And actually, just as a side point, Manjari, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, these 8 things are my separated energies. And so this is why, even though we see, sometimes we confuse the mind with the brain, but actually the brain is actually the physical organ within the body. The mind is a subtle energy, or a subtle element that is that constitutes this entire material world.
Yeah, when you look at each of Krishna's elements, they are so powerful, right? Earth is so powerful. Any little earthquake can destroy everything. Water is so powerful. Air is so powerful. Fire is so powerful. Like California is going through the biggest wildfire, destroying everything. So the more subtle something gets, the more powerful it becomes. So subtler than all the 5 elements is the mind. So therefore it is so powerful, right? Power of the mind called adhabra, which means uncontrollable. Other than Krishna, nobody can control that mind. So
Right. Therefore, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, therefore we take Krishna's help.
Go ahead.
And that's
Also,
why the role of.
mind-
So may I finish? So
Just one second, Archana, let Manjari finish and then we'll come to you.
So basically, here's where the role of chanting comes, because that stops the chatter of the mind.
Yes.
It stops the chatter of the mind, and essentially what we are telling Krishna is that Krishna, please help me. And so when we start engaging with Krishna, because you can see that Maya cannot stand in front of Krishna. Maya can only stand behind Krishna. So when we are facing Krishna, then Maya automatically goes away.
And the mind slowly starts becoming enchanted by Krishna, because the mind is like a child also. It is so powerful. It's also described like a child. So the child has to be enchanted by something, then the child will naturally go towards that. So we enchant the mind by chanting Krishna's names.
I like that. The enchant of
Yeah. Very
yes,
interesting. Thank you.
yes, Archana, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on also. Today I was listening to Amren Prabhu's video, some lecture, and he was saying that Atma refers to the soul, but it also refers to the mind,
Yeah.
like Sanskrit in Sanskrit language. So one thing, and second thing, when we were talking about the mind and the chanting. So basically, I also read, I saw some videos on subconscious mind and how to heal it, because we have some impression from our past lives in our subconscious mind. So what when we chant a mantra, so like the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we are saying that we want to engage ourselves in the service of Radha and Krishna. We mean that when we are chanting. So what we are doing is we are reprogramming our subconscious mind, and we are like changing our consciousness while doing that. So this will help us not to attract the same kind of wrong things that we were attracting in the past. So even if you see scientifically, actually chanting actually reprograms our whole life. So we should always keep on chanting as much as we can.
Very
So
nice.
yeah,
Thank you so much, Archana, for that. Yes, absolutely. For that.
I just wanted to add on that. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji and Mataji. In today's class, I really like 2 points. The first one is about the instructions of your spiritual master. So I really like that point, and once I heard it from Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's lecture also, that how you will never be disconnected from your Guru by always following the instructions. So when you always keep in mind his instructions and follow him, you are not away from your Guru. He's always maybe he's not physically present, but mentally he will be always with you. So that point I really like. And the other point, in text 2, in the purport, Prabhupada has mentioned that all the Varna ashrams are important. It's not like one is less and one is more, because when they have the same mission of life, knowing about the Supreme. So I really like that point. So yeah, the 2 points I like.
Thank you very much.
Also, I would like to add on here, like how I understand this thing, the instruction thing is that like Krishna and Krishna's name and his form and his qualities are non-different. It's all Krishna. In the same way, when it comes to a guru's physical presence or his instructions are all the same. And also in one of the lectures of Prabhupada ji, he said that when I'll not be there, these instructions, when you will hear my voice, you will know, okay, here is Guru Maharaj, here is Prabhupada ji. Now he's speaking to me. Now I have to follow him. So this is what I've heard. So
Nice. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Let's see. Gregory, did you have something you wanted to share? And then Radhika after that. Or Radhika, you want to go first, whatever. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I really like the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you for giving it to me.
So much.
I haven't been reading it. I mean, I just started reading it like yesterday again because I wish I could have read him. I wish I would have read him more. I wish I would have had the actual books that you gave me, but they're in storage because when I moved to Cumberland,
Right.
I don't put them, so just put them in storage.
So you can read with us now. I think that'll be
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I can also go to Database.
Yes,
Yes.
you can do that for sure.
And I want to thank you all for everything you do.
Thank you, Gregory.
Thank you, Gregory.
Thank you.
So honored to have you in our association.
Thanks.
Radhika, now go ahead. Last and then we'll check.
I have a question. When you were mentioning that before endeavoring for anything, we need to meditate upon it, right? Like every big soul has like whether it's Brahma or any other Vyasdev. So, what is the message for us here? That
The message for us is that when we are trying, if we want to become an instrument, then, you know, like Vaisheshika Prabhu says, that we want to distribute the flow, right? The spillover, whatever we have, whatever realization. So for that, it's as important as it is for us to distribute, it is to actually taste it ourselves.
Yeah, like when this is why chanting is so important. Before we start our day, before we do anything during the day, we dedicate time to chant, and this is to purify our existence and to also to distribute that, become an instrument of that Krishna's mercy ourselves. So not even for doing big things, but for doing anything, we meditate always. What to speak of doing something big.
But
So,
yeah, in that case, one can also do things mechanically, right? I am doing things mechanically. My chanting and everything can be mechanical, and it might not have that element of concentration where I'm actually meditating, where I'm wanting to put my energy into. So
Yeah, I mean that is always a struggle with meditation. It can become a ritual or become mechanical, but we can always turn it around, right? Chanting is very different. In other rituals, it's hard to turn them around after you spend so much time. But with chanting, with the next mantra, even if you have chanted mechanically for our whole life, but the next mantra, we can always turn it around and put our whole heart into it.
so that's a really good segue
Yeah.
for our chanting. So I guess the one thing we should try and do today is let's, you know, we take it step by step.